I pushed the right button. Great. Okay. So I want to start by thanking everybody for adjusting their schedules to be able to come in tonight instead of tomorrow night. I know that most of you are very busy people and adjusting your schedules for this, and I appreciate it. I'd like to start by introducing myself just a little bit because I see some faces who I've either just met or only met a couple of times. So my name is Rabbi Dov Chastain, and like I mentioned, I am a Georgia boy. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. When I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic or lymphocytic, some people say different ways, leukemia. They call it ALL. And I was on chemotherapy for 3 years, but thank God I had a full and complete recovery. And nowadays, I don't even have to go get checked up. I had that period of my life ended when I was 19. I no longer ever have to go back and get checked up, so thank God I am doing fine. And I lived in Atlanta till I was 18 years old. When I was 18, I took a gap year in Israel, which turned into 8 gap years. So I was there for a little while, and during the summers, I would go back to the United States to work on a degree, and I eventually got 2 smichas, 2 rabbinical ordinations in Israel, one from Yeshiva Space Yisrael, which was my second stop in my yeshiva tour in Israel. The first one was Or Yerushalayim OJ, which was in Moshav Beit Meir. The second one was in Yeshiva Space Yisrael, which is the more prestigious of the two. That one was in Neve Yaakov, which is a neighborhood in the northern part of Yerushalayim, about as far north as you can go before you hit the Arab villages up there. So I got a rabbinical ordination from there and from based in the Jewish court in Jerusalem. And during the summers I was working on a degree, and I got a master's degree in education, administration, and supervision from Loyola University in Chicago. And while I was in Israel, I got married, and for the last 3 years I lived there in Israel, I was married, and we had 2 kids born in Israel, and 1 kid born here in Portland. And I've lived in Portland for almost a year and a half now. I work for NCSY. Okay, so we are going to be speaking tonight about the last of the 10 Commandments, Lo Sachmod, which is loosely translated as Thou shalt not covet. And covet is one of those old Englishy type of words that a lot of people don't know what it means. So on a simple level, to covet someone's possessions means to desire another individual's possessions. That's what coveting means. And it's often associated with jealousy or with greed, and we will dissect its connection to jealousy and greed. But first I want to get comfortable with the 2 verses in the Torah, the 2 psukim that introduce this mitzvah. The first in the first set of 10 commandments in Parshas Yisro, in the book of Shemos of Exodus, and the second in Devarim in Deuteronomy, which is the rendition of the 10 commandments that Moshe said over himself. And one thing you might notice that's going to be different than between me and some of the other people that spoke is I like to include the audience. So is there anybody that feels comfortable reading the first source? And if not, that's fine also. Anybody? Steve! You want to do it?
You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor.
Correct. So we're talking about, again, on a simple level, it seems like desiring, only desiring. So if you desire your friend's house, you desire his wife, his servant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, anything that belongs to him, you have transgressed the negative prohibition of lo sachmod, of coveting someone else's possessions. Now, we're going to look at the second source here, and I want everybody to put on their yeshiva thinking caps and see if they can pick up on any differences between the first mentioning of lo sachmod and the second. And does anybody want to read the second? Okay.
And you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor shall you desire your neighbor's house, his field, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Thank you. One thing to point out really quickly in the Hebrew here is that it starts off with the same wording. It says, V'lo sachmod eshes re'echa. You should not covet your neighbor's wife. V'lo sis'ave beis re'echa. When it talks about a person's house, it says that you shouldn't desire your neighbor's house, but it uses a different wording. It uses the wording of lo sis'ave. And Rashi actually comments on that right here in the section from Rashi I quoted for you. It says, V'lo sis'ave, and you shouldn't desire. Lo serug, he's quoting Onkelos. Onkelos was a translation of the Torah into Aramaic, and Onkelos' translation is lo serug, which also means desire. Afhu lashon chemda. It's also a lashon of chemda, of desiring, chemda, from the same word as lo Sachmod. Kamo, just like we find in Bereshis in Genesis, Beis Tes 2:9. Nechmad Lamara, something that is beautiful to the eye. To Targaminon, that we translate to Demargeg Lemechsi, something that's beautiful to see. And it's also something we find in the description of Israel. Israel is called Eretz Chemda, the desirable land. So according to Rashi, Chemda, Lo Sachmod, and Lo Sesave are really the same thing. They're both ways to say, don't desire your friend's possessions. On a simple level, Rashi says they're really the same. Has anybody noticed any other differences between the two versions?
The sequence.
Yes. Which things with the sequence?
Well, first the first one is your house, and the next one is the wife, and the next one starts with the wife.
Right. It switches. First one goes house then wife. The second one goes wife then house. That's one thing. Anybody else? Yes.
The first one is just strictly covet, and the second one is covet, and then also talks about desire.
Correct. That's the two words, lo Sachmod and lo Sesave, which Rashi seemed to say are about the same thing, but you nailed it on the head. That there are going to be a lot of commentaries that detect a very strong difference between those two, and we're going to dissect that as we go along.
Isn't coveting almost kind of like holding on to, kind of thing, whereas desire is just purely
an emotion?
Yeah.
So we're going to see some commentaries looking at coveting as being not just an emotional or an intellectual state. It's going to be actually following through with that.
Mm-hmm.
To covet is not just I want it; it's that I'm going to follow through with it. So we're going to see that develop, and a lot of commentaries.
Desire, I think, but coveting is a different ballgame.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Touch this
In fact, you're really already tuning into the topic: jealousy, mind, or matter. Is it just a mindset, or is it something more? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So right, the three things that we mentioned so far are the change of wife and house in the Pesukim. We spoke about the word tesave, to desire. There's one more. Anybody know what the last one is? One more difference between the first pasuk and the second one.
Whatever and anything? Is that different words?
That's not the one that I am looking for.
I don't know if it's translated.
Yes, she got it. And the second one, in Moshe's rendition of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy, he throws in the word sadehu, his field. And in the first rendition, I think I have some diaper rash cream on me. And that's what happens when you have 3 children, 3 and under. Oh, look at that. Okay, fine. So, yeah, he throws in the word sadehu. And these additions really bothered the Ramban. The Ramban is Nachmanides, who gives reasons for the differences, and he explains that they're different to teach you different lessons about the mitzvah of not coveting. So let's turn to source number 3 here, Nachmanides on the Torah. Nachmanides, by the way, was one of the foremost commentaries on the Torah and on the Talmud. He wrote on all the Torah and almost all the Talmud. He lived in Spain and then in Israel in the 1200s. A little after Rashi, not so much. He's in a period of time called the Rishonim. Those are the early commentaries, which ends around 1500. So that's around when he was living in the 1200s. So he says over here, in his commentary to the Torah, I actually put the two together. This is kind of a mix of his commentary, both in Yisro and in Va'eschanan, the second version of the Ten Commandments. So it says, in the first version of the Ten Commandments, the description of lo Sachmod was crafted in a way that the human mind would easily be able to follow. It describes the normal course of life by first mentioning your friend's house, as an intelligent individual first acquires a dwelling. It then describes your friend's wife, servant, and maidservant, as once one acquires a dwelling, he begins to build his life and takes a wife and then servants and maidservants. So when God lays out the Ten Commandments for the first time, he lays it out in a way that a person can easily follow it and easily contemplate the normal flow. And it's something that we see a lot of times in Torah. Rashi states a bunch of times throughout the Torah that Diber HaKasav V'Hova, that the Psukim speak in the normal flow of life. There's different times where the Torah may give an example, and Rashi will jump up and say, why is this example? Why here? Like, there's other people that do this thing. And Rashi will mention, well, that's what's normal. So the Torah always speaks in what's normal, so it's easier for us to understand. In the second version of the Ten Commandments, I'm back in the source here. In the second version of the Ten Commandments, the pasuk first mentions coveting another's wife, like Steve pointed out, to point out that a man has a stronger negative drive for sexual promiscuity than other drives. So when Moshe lays it out, Moshe being a human being, when he lays it out, he first mentions, he wants to make a point that this is a stronger human drive than the others. This pasuk also points out that desiring another's property, tuning into, remind me your name one more time.
Corey.
Corey.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that. There's a Corey over there too. Yeah. So, remembering what Corey said, that when we mentioned lo sasava, to not desire, we didn't say lo sachmod, we said lo sasava. So this pasuk is pointing out that desiring another's property falls into the category of lo sachmod, meaning if one wants to steal from his friend, but cannot because the other individual is stronger than him, or because the government would catch and punish him, he has nevertheless transgressed this commandment. Right? So that's what he's saying when it says lo sasava beis reyecha. It changes just from saying don't covet your friend's house, but even don't desire, to tell you that even if you're not going to be able to follow through with your desire, you will already have transgressed lo sachmod. And the way that Nachmanides, or the Ramban, is looking at it is still, although he has mentioned a little bit of a difference between desiring and coveting, he's still holding that they're really part of the same mitzvah. And he finishes by mentioning the pasuk also adds your friend's field, like you said, that to teach us that not only is it forbidden to covet movable objects for a person's spouse, but property as well. And I want to do one more source, which is the Sforno, who's also a very well-known commentary on the Torah, before we really start dissecting what the mechanism of lo sachmod is. So it says here in Sforno, which is going on Shemos, the quote from Yisro, the first of the two psukim we looked at, let this be a powerful deterrent for you. For if you do not covet, no forces shall covet your possessions, as it says in Shemos 34:24. No one will covet your land when you go up to appear before your God, 3 times a year. Now this is speaking about being Oleh L'Regel. We have a mitzvah in the Torah to go up when there's a Beis HaMikdash, when there's a holy temple in Jerusalem, to go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, right, to go up to appear before Hashem, to bring sacrifices, to pray at the holy temple. So when we're going up, think about this for a second. Every able-bodied male, well, there's different people that were exempt, like if you're blind, but every able-bodied male is going up to Yerushalayim and leaving his wife and children unprotected. So on a regular level, on a non-Klal Yisrael, on a non-Jewish people level, that doesn't sound like a very smart thing to do. You are going to leave your cities open to being plundered, to being attacked. It doesn't sound very smart. But the Sforno is telling us that we have a havtacha, we have a promise, that if you do what you're supposed to do, if you follow Hashem, if you don't covet, then no forces are going to covet you. No one will covet your land when you go up and appear before God 3 times a year. So if we do what is incumbent upon us, then Hashem will protect us. And it finishes here by saying coveting eventually leads to theft, as it says by Achan, and I coveted them and I took them. That comes from Yoshua, from Joshua 7:21. Just to let you know that story, when the Jewish people crossed over into Israel, after the 40 years in the desert, they crossed over and Joshua was leading them. They first conquered Jericho, they conquered Jericho, and they destroyed them. Wasn't the most difficult battle for Klal Yisrael. They were able to destroy them. And after they won, they took part of the booty and they sanctified it for use for only holy purposes. They sanctified it to Hashem. And they prepared for the next battle. Their next battle was with a city named Ai. And they marched against Ai, and they went to fight, and they lost. And that really troubled Yoshua, because Joshua was given a promise by Hashem, you're going to go, you're going to wipe everybody out, no one's going to stand before you, Rak Chazak Be'amat, be strong and courageous, you're the guy. You're going to be able to do this. And he marches to Ai, and he gets beaten. So he davens to Hashem, he inquires what's going on. And he is told that someone took from the booty that was sanctified for Hashem. And they used the Urim B'Tumim, if I remember correctly, the breastplate with all the stones that would light up. And they figured out who it was. And it turned out it was this man, Achan. And Achan eventually confessed, and he said, and I coveted them, and I took them. So the Sforno is using that as a proof to say that coveting eventually leads to theft, which is something that Corey was pointing out also, that coveting might have a little bit more than just a thought process, but going towards actually taking something. Now, but after most of the commentaries we've seen still have listed lo sasava and lo sachmod, not to covet, not to desire, as the same type of commandment. And it seems like Hashem is commanding us to think in a specific way, that He's made a commandment on our emotions, on our feelings, and this really bothered a lot of commentaries. How could Hashem do that? How could He make a commandment on our feelings? And I'll quote the Ten Commandments, which is a scholarly work on the Ten Commandments, which I believe he's quoting the Ibn Ezra, which we're going to take a better look at in a second. But he says the commentaries question how the Torah can legislate feelings. We understand that an action can be forbidden. Right now I'm not reading on the sheet per se. But how can the Torah tell us how to think and feel, especially if an individual sees something that is pleasing to the eye? A lot of commentaries were really bothered by this. And you could take a look at source number 5 and source number 6, because these are other examples of places where the commentaries really struggle to deal with an emotional mitzvah. And Hashem is almost playing mind games with us. He's telling us that we have to think a very specific way. We have to have a specific feeling. In source number 5, it's a very famous example, Vayikra 19:18. You shall neither take revenge from nor bear a grudge against the members of your people. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Hashem. The famous one, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you're commanding me to love him. Maybe I really don't like him. Maybe he's a jerk. Maybe I have trouble with him. That's not so easy. And not only that, you're telling me to love him as myself. Well, when I look out of my own two eyes, I have a perspective that is only me, and this is my body, and this is who I am, and you're telling me that I should love him as much as me? How am I supposed to do that? There's a lot of Hasidic Torah that speaks about how at the very source of your neshama, you're all the same. But it's hard to hammer in. It's not so easy. A lot of commentaries really struggle with it. And source number 6 from Devarim 6:5, and you shall love Hashem your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your means or resources. And that's the v'ahavta, that you should love Hashem. That's also very difficult for a lot of commentaries. You're commanding an emotion. I understand an action, but an emotion is very difficult. And the Ibn Ezra, who we're about to see, really struggled with this and gave what I would call the ultimate antidote for greed, because he gives a very powerful parable, a powerful mashal. Corey, can you read it?
Sure. Many people have struggled to understand this mitzvah. Commentaries question on how the Torah can legislate feelings. We understand that an action can be forbidden, but how can the Torah tell us how to think and feel, especially if an individual sees something that's pleasing to the eye? Oh, I just heard that. An analogy to help us understand the way we must view the belongings of another. A simple peasant is intelligent enough to realize that if he sees the beautiful daughter of the king, he would not desire in his heart to be with her. He knows that this is impossible, as he is a peasant and she is a princess. In the same way, every Jew must regard the possessions of another as totally off limits. If we had the proper perspective, we would realize that this is preposterous to dream of taking another's possession, as God knows what we should all have and gave us what we need. Another person's possessions were given to him specifically, and we have no connection and have no connection to me. Desiring what does not belong to us must be so absurd that the thought will never even arise. With this mindset, temptation does not occur and restraint is not necessary.
Right, so you said two very key words there that are very similar: perspective and mindset. It's not exactly that Hashem is trying to control our emotions. He's telling you what to feel right now. He's trying to give you a mindset and a perspective that will be beneficial to us and help us get through life. With like he said here at the end, with this mindset, temptation does not occur and restraint is not necessary. It has the ability to improve a person's quality of life, right? As they won't always be running around desiring other people's things. They'll be able to be a little bit more happy with what they have. And that's actually a quote from our sages in Pirkei Avot, the chapters of our fathers. It says, Ezehu Ashir, who's a rich person, Hasameach Bechelko, he who's happy with what he has. So it's more of a perspective and a mindset that Hashem is trying to prescribe for us that will be able to give us a better quality of life. Now, I have a source I want to share with you that's not on this sheet. Here we go. This is the Beis HaLevi. Pretty intense looking guy, right? Yeah. So the Beis HaLevi, his picture really goes with his personality. He's one of these people where you see the picture and like, oh, that's him. Which is not true with Moshe Rabbeinu, by the way. There's an interesting famous medrash by Moshe that there was a king who heard about Moshe taking the Jewish people out of Israel, and he wanted to know, like, who is this great leader who could do such a thing? And he sent someone to go paint a portrait of Moshe, and he painted a portrait and he brought it back to the king, and the king had some people that were able to interpret portraits and look at a person's face and really see what type of person that person is. And they took the portrait of Moshe back to this king, and the interpreter said, that's the face of a murderer. How could that be Moshe? And he went to inquire of Moshe how it could be. And Moshe said, because a person who really is able to conquer himself and work on himself and work on his character traits can take what he should be and be able to harness that for the service of Hashem. They say something very similar by King David also. They said King David was built by his personality to be a shedder of blood, but he was able to harness that and use it for the service of Hashem. So, back to the Beis HaLevi. So the Beis HaLevi was named Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik. There are a few others named that after him, most notably the Rav of YU, one of the Rosh Yeshiva of YU, known as the Rav in Yeshiva University circles. So Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik lived in Belarus in the 1800s, and what I'm going to share with you is a very lofty level. I don't think I'm holding there, but it's something to think about, and it's something that my Rabbi Hillel Ruvel, who should live and be well, he's actually been kind of sick. He was in a coma for a little while. He had to have a lot of surgery on his stomach, and he now has some sort of mesh lining his stomach to hold everything together, and he needs everybody's prayers, and he should live and be well. But he told this to me, which is why I wanted to share it with you. So the Beis HaLevi lived in the 1800s in Belarus, and he was the first rabbi in the line of Brisk, which was a very prominent yeshiva, which still exists today. There's actually two branches of it in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim. So, and I've read this before also. I read it in a book called Talei Oros, Sparks of Light, and everybody that comments on it, there's comments on it after by different prominent rabbis, and all of them say that the Beis HaLevi himself really represented this in his everyday life. It wasn't just something he wrote and he didn't live by it. It was really something you could see on him and in the way that he lived his life. But like I said, it's a very lofty level. But I'm going to share it with you. So he says the following. A man in the heat of passion, as he is running to fulfill his sinful desires, and his evil inclination burns inside him like fire. Ooh. Even in this situation, there is one way to completely douse the flames of desire, that being the power of true fear. Fear has the power to squelch the strongest passion. Right? He's talking about internalizing fear of heaven. This is a person that had tremendous Yirah Shamayim, that really internalized having a connection to Hashem and viewing Hashem as, although he's Avinu, he's our Father, he's also Malkeinu. We refer to him in davening on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, on the high holidays, as Avinu Malkeinu. He's our Father, he's our King. He's also our King, though. There has to be a certain awe and trepidation of things that he told us to do. So he goes further with a little bit of a parable to illustrate. Picture a man running to fulfill his desires. To reach his desire, he has to cross over a narrow bridge suspended high above a river. As he runs across the bridge, one of the rungs of the bridge collapses under his feet, and he nearly plunges to his doom. Know clearly, during that moment of imminent danger, his passion was extinguished, and all that was present was fear. It consumed his very being for that moment in time. This is how God programmed human beings to work. Fear overpowers emotion. The Torah warns us not to covet another's property. If an individual had true fear of sin, he would not be able to covet another's property. Deep-seated fear of God would overcome him or her, and he would immediately abandon such thoughts. This is the answer to those who say, I could not help myself. For anyone with true yiras shamayim, fear of heaven, would not fall into such a trap. This is the meaning of the verse that appears at the end of the Sinaitic experience, so that fear of him shall be on your faces, so you should not come to sin. A small amount of fear can save a person from much sin. So like I said, this is a very, very lofty level. But I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was worth it, and it's a tremendous lesson. Rabbi Reuvel, being a man who likes to show both sides of the coin, also quoted the Hasidic masters in that class series, and he stated that Hasidic philosophy, like most of us know, focuses much more on love of God than fear. If you go to the Ashkenazi yeshivas, the Litvish yeshivas, Lithuanian yeshivas, they're much more into Musar, into building character traits, and into yiras shamayim, building a fear of Hashem. Hasidim are much more into building a love of Hashem. Frankly, both of them are necessary for a healthy relationship with God. But he wanted to quote one of the Hasidic masters who formulated a very similar parable to the Beis HaLevi, focusing much more on the aspect of loving God. So he said, picture a man running to fulfill his desires. Sounds familiar. As he runs, he sees a dear loved one on the other side of the river calling to him. He is overcome by his love and desires to be close to his loved one and abandons his pursuit of his base desires. Know clearly, if a person focuses on all that God does for him, he will be aroused to love his Father in heaven, and that love will cause him to refrain from sin. He will never desire to sever his connection to his Father in heaven. So too, a person who truly develops a love and a relationship with God would not be able to covet the possessions of another, as such would cause a rift between he or she and his Father, or her Father, in heaven. So that's a different way. That's a little bit more in touch with this generation, frankly, because I think this generation, from everything that I've seen, is much more in touch with the idea of loving Hashem. In fact, it's a big difference that you sense in the yeshivas nowadays, because my Rosh Shiva in Beis Yisrael, so he's an elderly man. He's in his 70s now. He's definitely from a different generation. If you said something less than intelligent in shir, in class, you asked a less than intelligent question, he would let you know. He's going to let you know that. And he was a very, very sharp guy. And nowadays in the yeshivas, you're only allowed to go to that shir. You're only allowed to go to that level of classes if you had been in the yeshiva for a long time. You could listen to his weekly class, but you couldn't go to his everyday class unless you had tough skin. You had to be in yeshivas for I think, usually it was a 4th or 5th year shir, 4th or 5th year class. So you had to be there for a while. And his son is the exact opposite. His son is going to be the next Rosh Hashiva. He already named him that because he didn't want any of these feuds happening after he passed away. So he already named his son Moshe as the next Rosh Hashiva. And Rav Moshe is a very different person. If you ask Rav Moshe something stupid in shir, in class, he will take it and he'll explain very nicely how you're wrong and rip what you said into little pieces, but very nicely with a smile. And you see, Dov, why it's not like that anymore? And now you understand. Idiot. But he would say it in a very nice way. He would never make you feel stupid. He would do it in a very nice way. The Rosh Hashiva would be like, what are you talking about? Can you read? Fine. It's a very, very different personality. But nowadays in yeshivos, the love of Hashem is really what needs to be used, because people don't have the strength to withstand the fire that burned in the yeshivas of old. It's just not something that people can take nowadays. If you relate that way with people, you're going to send them off the derech. You're going to send them off the path. You're going to send them away from Torah. It doesn't really work anymore, unless you have really tough skin. But a lot of people don't. Okay, now that I'm done with that, let's move on here, and we are now going to completely flip everything that we just said on its head, because we've been talking about Lo Sachmod, and this is how the Ibn Ezra looks at it, is completely as a mindset and as a perspective, and now we are going to go much more down Corey's road and look at a different way of examining Lo Sachmod. Let us look at the Mechilta and Shemos, source number 8. The Mechilta is a halachic medrash. I just want to explain what that means, because I throw out words like Mechilta and halachic medrash. And just to explain what that means is that it is a method of Torah study that explains the 613 mitzvos by identifying the source and the Torah that it comes from, and explaining how that source was linked to and described the mitzvah in question. That's what a halachic midrash was. It was a lot different than other midrashim, like the Midrash Rabbah, which takes a story from the Torah that either occurred or that you might not have heard, and it's filling in some of the blanks. And other midrashim a lot of time use hyperbole. They exaggerate a little bit. And my Rebbe, the Shiva, the scary one. Fine. So he used to say that if you say that you don't believe every medrash, you are a heretic, and if you say you believe everyone, you are a fool. So medrash lands somewhere in between. It's something where you can't take everything at face value in medrashes like the Midrash Rabbah, which are telling fairly fantastic stories. But a medrash like the Mechilta is only coming to point out where a certain mitzvah comes from. So you hear a mitzvah, you're like, where is this from? So he's there to point out where it's from. So he says over here, John, can you read it? Source number 8.
Why in the second... Wait.
You're
Why
right.
in the- huh?
You're right. You're in the right
Why
place.
in the second rendition of the Ten Commandments does it say, lo sasave, do not desire, to teach you that both desiring and coveting are both forbidden?
Freeze. So he just told you there's two different things. There's desiring and there's coveting. So he's already going down the road of these are two different things. Keep going.
How do we know that desiring leads to coveting? Because it says, do not desire and do not covet. How do we know that coveting leads to theft? Because it says, and they desired fields and stole them. Micah.
Yeah, Micha 2.
Micha 2. So exactly what is the definition of desire and what is the definition of coveting? Desire is in the heart, as the pasuk says, when your heart desires, whereas coveting is through actions, as the pasuk says, do not covet silver and gold and take them for yourself.
So he just said that lo sasava, do not desire, is something that's maybe more related to what the Ibn Ezra just said. It's a perspective, it's a mindset, maybe even an emotion, but it's something that takes place intellectually. Whereas when it comes to coveting, coveting doesn't occur until you actually take an action. Like it says in the pasuk here, do not covet silver and gold and take them for yourself. And he's trying to say until you get to that and take them for yourself, you're not really doing the prohibition of lo sachmod. So there are commentaries that say that really lo sasava and lo sachmod are two parts of the same prohibition, but the majority of commentaries, like the Rambam, who we are going to examine, say they're two different prohibitions. Do not covet and do not desire. Do not covet.
So lo sachmod is do not covet?
Correct. And lo sasava is do not desire. And we are going to take a deeper look at that right now. So before we go to the Rambam, I have one other source I'd like to share with you before we get there. It's also not on the sheet, although I submitted it to be on the sheet. But it's not here. So there's one main time in the Babylonian Talmud that it discusses lo sachmod, and it really comes up in passing, and if you blink, you miss it. It's at the bottom of 5b in Bava Metzia. It's a one-liner. That's it. And it goes like this. Lo sachmod le'inshi below dami mashmalahu. Many people wrongly assume that the prohibition do not covet applies only where no money is given in exchange for the coveted object. Meaning many people wrongly think that lo sachmod is just desiring, but if you give money for it, that's not lo sachmod anymore. He's saying that's wrong. Even if you give money for it, it could be lo sachmod. If you have, I really want that Shema Yisrael kippah, give it to me. I don't really want to. I really want it though. No, I don't really. It's $5. Just give it to me. You know, like that's already. And if you give in and give it to me, and you didn't want to, but I'm just, yeah, that's lo sachmod. I coveted it. I took it. I gave you a little money, but I wanted it, and you didn't want to give it to me. That's lo sachmod. He says that even if you give money, it's still lo sachmod. He's also taught. So a lot of commentaries learn that that's telling you that lo sachmod also comes along with an action. Even if you give money, even if you take it, that's still lo sachmod. It's not just desiring. Now, that goes along with that Mechilta. It's going to go along with the Rambam. However, there are some heavy hitters that even learn that Gemara along with the Ibn Ezra, the Ramban, all the commentaries that say lo sachmod is also a mindset and a perspective. They learn when it says lo sachmod le'inshi below dami mashmalahu, it means to say that, yeah, people think lo sachmod is without giving money, and they're right. There's a Tosfos in Sanhedrin on 25b, I want to say, that says that it's trying to tell you that that's correct. That lo sachmod means without giving money, meaning it's something that occurs in your mind. It's intellectual. It's a mindset. So that's the Tosfos. And the Tosfos is usually a very heavy hitter. He does come into play in halacha and Jewish law. However, almost all of the big halachic commentaries, Rambam, Torah, Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, right, they all hold like the Mechilta and the way that he views lo sachmod. So it really comes out on a halachic level, on a level of Jewish law. You do not transgress lo sachmod until you actually go after the object that you coveted. And we're going to look at that in the Mishnah Torah. This Mishnah Torah is from the laws of damages, specifically the laws of theft, and it is chapter 1, halachos 9 through 12. And this is also, the reason I brought this, I could have brought a lot of things that say pretty much the same thing. I brought the Rambam because he really codifies it the best way. The Sefer HaChinuch, which is a book that goes through all of the 613 mitzvos and explains them, pretty much says the same thing, but the Rambam says it a little bit more in depth, so I chose to go through the Rambam. Right. Could you read the Rambam Halacha 9?
Ooh. Anyone who covets a servant or maidservant, a house or utensils that belong to a colleague, or any other article that he can purchase from him, and pressures him with friends and requests until he agrees to sell it to him, violates a negative commandment, even though he pays much money for it, as Exodus 20:14 states, do not covet.
Right, and even though he pays money for it, like we just saw in the Gemara, if you pay money for it, it doesn't matter. You wanted something and you pressured your friend to sell it. And a lot of people say that that's the key words in the Rambam, and that what actually really violates lo sachmod, it's not a mindset, and it's not when you take the object either. It's the pressure that you put on your friend. That's real coveting. I want that. Please give it to me. That's coveting. A lot of people say that's what the Rambam means. It's not the taking it. It's the pressure on your friend to get it. Okay. Keep going. Hit me.
Oh.
Yeah. Don't really hit.
20. Where do we?
We're in the middle of 9. The violation.
Oh, the violation of this commandment is not punished by lashes because it does not involve a deed. One does not.
Stop there for 1 second.
Oh.
Does not involve a deed. That goes with what we just said. That it's not the deed that does it. It's the pressure. It's really the pressure. But he's about to contradict himself. Keep going.
One does not violate this commandment until one actually takes the article he covets as reflected.
How could that be? He just told you that you pressure your friend, you get it. It doesn't involve a deed, which means it's the pressure, it's not the taking. But now he just told you that you don't violate this commandment until one actually takes the article he covets. Keep going a little further.
As reflected by Devarim 7:25, do not covet the gold and silver on these statues, and take it for yourself. Implied is that the Hebrew Sachmod refers to coveting accompanied by a deed.
Interesting. So he seemingly just contradicted himself. So the Ravid, who is a commentary on the Rambam, who always loves to jump all over that type of stuff, says in source number 10, we're going to go back to the other ones, says over here, Ravid glosses on Maimonides. The Rambam states that one does not receive malchus, whiplashes, for perpetrating lo sachmod, as is a prohibition that does not include an action. And any prohibition that does not include an action does not deserve whiplashes. And the Ravid agrees that it doesn't get whiplashes, but for a different reason than the Rambam, because he's going to point out the Rambam contradicts himself. The Rambam seems to be contradicting himself with this statement, as he states that one is not obligated until he performs a physical action. One could suggest, says the Ravid, however, that a person does not receive malchus, as he can rectify the situation by returning the object. And there's another reason to not receive whiplashes. If it's a lav sheditchen be'aseh or something like that, that's the word of the Gemara, but if it's a negative commandment that you can fix, if I steal something from you, I can give it back. If I have the ability to give it back, then I don't get whiplashes. I have to get pressured to give it back, but I don't get whiplashes for it. So the Ravid says, I'm with you that you don't get whiplashes for it. The reason you don't get whiplashes, though, is because you could give it back. So that states the Ravid's problem with it. There's an answer. I don't really want to go too deep into it. If you want to know where to look, it's in the Maggid Mishnah, the Rav HaMaggid, who is a commentary on the Mishnah Torah that the Rambam wrote. He really goes through how the Rambam is not really contradicting himself, but it's not exactly the topic we want to focus on now. So we're going to keep going to Halacha 10. Can you read it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone who desires a home, a wife, utensils, or anything else belonging to a colleague that he can acquire from him violates a negative commandment at the time he thinks in his heart. How is it possible to acquire this from him? And his heart is aroused by the matter, as Deuteronomy 5:18 states. Do not desire. Desire refers to feelings in the heart alone.
Right. That's lo sasava. So he right now just told you that he views that as a different commandment. He says that if you already think in your heart about taking something from someone, how can I get it? That's already do not desire. Also, just something to point out, do not desire doesn't just mean like, that looks cool, I want to have it. It means that I'm thinking like, I really, like, how can I take that from him? I haven't pressured him yet. I haven't tried to get it. But once I think like, that how am I going to get it? That's already lo sachmod. Lo sasava. That's do not desire. That's different than lo sachmod, because lo sachmod means I come with John and gang up on you and say like, yo, give me that kippah.
I can run pretty fast, though.
Huh? John's big. He's a biker.
I can run fast.
Yeah, well, he's got strong legs from bicycling. He also owns...
I hike.
Yeah, well, he owns a motorcycle. He can chase you down.
I own a car.
That's true. I don't know. What goes faster?
Car.
I don't know. Could be. You both drive the same car. You both have a Civic, actually. There you go. The drag race. Okay. Moving along, we'll go to Halacha 11. It says here, desire leads to coveting, and coveting leads to robbery. For if the owners do not desire to sell, despite the offer of much money and many supplications by friends, the person motivated by desire will be moved to robbery, as it says in Micha 2:2, which we've quoted before. They coveted houses, and they stole them. And if the owner stands up against them to save his property, or in another way prevents the person motivated by desire from robbing, will be moved to murder. Take, for example, the narrative of Achav and Navot, just to tell you what that is. Achav was an evil king, and Achav saw the field of a man named Navot, and it wasn't such a nice field. It wasn't a crazy nice field, but it was in an area that would have been opportune for Achav to get it. And he went to Navot, and he said, I'll give you some money. And Navot said, no, I don't really want it. He's like, I'll give you lots of money. I'm a king. Look at my gold. And he said, I'll give you tons of money. I'll take care of this for you. Just give me the field. And Navot said, like, this is my ancestral field. My family has had this field since Joshua and the judges divided this land. I don't want to sell it to you. I appreciate it. Way to go, King. You're doing a good job. I don't want to sell this field. And it really, really bothered him. Achav had an evil wife. Her name was Jezebel. I want to say that's how you say it in English. Jezebel. And she helped plot with him to figure out how to off Navot and take his field. So that's what it's saying over here. You can eventually come to murder. Right? It could lead to lifnei iver. It could lead to you giving your friend bad advice to try to usurp it from him. And it's a very slippery slope, the entire idea of lo sachmod and lo sasava. He's trying to tell you that if a person can't get a hold of himself, he'll live a life of frustration for his entire life. Could even come to the point where he's a threat to society. And this goes along with the Rashi in Shema, based on a medrash in Tanchuma, which says ha'ayin roeh, that the eye sees, the halev chomed, and the heart desires, the guf oses ha'avera, and the body does the sin. That it really is a slippery slope. One leads to the other. If you don't catch yourself, if you don't start working on these types of things and building within yourself a perspective that God gave this person this object, it doesn't belong to me. He knows what I need. He's going to give me what I need. And if I asked this guy if he wanted to sell it to me, and he said no, I should leave him alone. If I don't, I could go down a very slippery slope. Halacha 12 here. Thus we see that a person who desires another person's property violates one negative commandment, that's lo sasava. One who purchases an object he desires after pressuring the owners and repeatedly asking them violates two negative commandments. Lo sasava was the desire, and now that he carried out with it and pressured him, lo sachmod. For that reason, the Torah prohibits both desiring and coveting. If he takes the article by robbery, he violates three negative commandments, the third being robbing. Now, this opinion like I mentioned earlier, is echoed through the halachic authorities. The Tur, who was the precursor to the Shulchan Aruch, brings it. The Shulchan Aruch, who is the code of Jewish law, brings that down. So on a halachic level, one doesn't violate lo Sachmod by just desiring another person's property. However, one would violate lo Sasave, and desiring another one's possessions is really, now that we've seen lo Sachmod is more of an action, desiring one's possessions could be applied to what the Ibn Ezra said, building this mindset and this perspective to stay away from other people's property. Now let's go to the very end. Now, there's a story that I always used to hear from my Rebbe about, I want to say that it was about the Maharal of Prague, that there's one time where he went to give a class, and he always had a custom to send out a list of sources. And one time he got to a class, and I think it was someone that was trying to mess him up, someone that was against him and his philosophies, and he saw that they were all the wrong sources. And he proceeded to give a brand new shir on all of the wrong sources and tied them in together perfectly. So this wasn't exactly the way that I wanted to space these last two sources, but I'm going to share with you a few thoughts that I think will really sum up everything that we want to say, and that will encapsulate and incorporate both of these final sources. And that is that the Medrash in Koheles Rabbah tells us that no one dies with even half of his desires fulfilled. Now the sages warn that these ideas of greed and jealousy could be a pursuit that consumes us for our entire life if we aren't careful. And as mentioned in the source 11 here, Ethics of Our Fathers 421, Rabbi Elazar Kapar said, envy, desire, and pursuit of honor remove a person from the world. And a lot of people interpret that means the world to come. You won't have a portion of the world to come. But there are just as many other commentaries that say that this is talking about this world too. That if you run after other people's possessions all your life, and you're always just trying to get more and more and more worldly possessions, you're going to ruin your time in this world too. You won't be happy. You'll never be fulfilled. It's something that our sages also warned us in the Gemara, Marba Nechasim, Marba Daiga. The more a person runs after possessions, the more he has to worry about. There's going to be more and more stuff that he's going to have to worry about, he's going to have to take care of. Rabbeinu Bechaye, who is another well-known commentary on the Torah, who also, he incorporates Kabbalah a little bit more, points out that Lo Sachmod is a very fitting end to the Ten Commandments. Because the Ten Commandments started with more of an intellectual mitzvah that is about faith in God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And it ends with a very intellectual mitzvah that also has to do with a person's faith in Lo Sachmod. Because if a person really has full faith in Hashem, like the Ibn Ezra said, he'll realize Hashem knows what's good for him. Hashem knows what's coming to this person. Hashem will give this person what he's supposed to have. And someone who transgresses Lo Sachmod denies the fact that Hashem knows what he should possess and what's coming to him. Doesn't believe that Hashem knows what's good for him. So Hashem doesn't want us to struggle our entire lives with these issues. He gives us an antidote. He's trying to give us in Lo Sachmod a way to create a mindset and a mindset and a perspective to be able to avoid having these issues our entire life. And that's there's one last form of jealousy that the Talmud tells us that actually is appropriate, and that's the last source here, source 12, Tractate Bavasra 21a. The jealousy of the wisdom of Torah scholars increases wisdom. It's the one type of jealousy that you're allowed to have. But that type of jealousy is not a jealousy that's going to lead you down a slippery slope and that will leave you unfulfilled your entire life. That type of jealousy is, I see a person who has Torah knowledge, I want to build my relationship with Hashem, just like that person. And I want to leave you with a bracha, with a blessing, that we're able to grow in our Torah knowledge and our relationship with Hashem and be able to enjoy a happy and fulfilled life. Thank you guys very much for coming.